Hello, my name is Russell Myers. Welcome to Issues Unite. All right, so Biden held his first press conference yesterday, and this is my first chance that I'm getting to watch it. I've started recording this at about 12 minutes in, and the first few minutes, as typical for a press conference, was basically a speech. Once he started taking questions, this is where I really start my commentary on this. So the first thing I'm going to note here is that at this point, most of the questions are coming from fawning neoliberal sources and talking about how immigrants are coming here because, they see you as a nice guy, and then he gets to launch into, basically what is meant to appeal to the conservative base. I think saying that he's not a nice guy, and something else that I've noted in the first few questions is that he keeps glancing down at notes, and everything that he is responding to and the method in which he is responding, you can tell that these questions were submitted in advance, and the responses are completely rehearsed. So I'm not getting sold on any of this. Right now I'm up to the point where he is talking about how 5,000 immigrants are going to be housed at a military base. That's not that. Does that strike you as a compassionate thing, or does that strike you more like a concentration camp? They're being held prisoner at a military base. All right, so the way I'm going to do this is to watch part of it and then offer a commentary. So you'll see breaks here and there. So I'm going to watch a few more minutes. Of course, any pause will just launch right back into the next portion here. So let me watch a little bit more. Sorry. Another thing I note in the first few minutes is how many times he says, "I was hired to solve problems." And he keeps repeating this. And again, this is campaigning. Look, every president, every elected official in our government is hired to solve problems. Do I have to tell you that people don't always do what they are hired to do? Now, in a larger sense, in this particular case, Biden was not hired to solve problems. He was hired to be the lesser of two evils. He was elected to be allegedly the lesser of two evils. He was elected to evict Trump. That was it. That was all. Nobody had any other actual expectations than for him to not be Trump. And I've already pointed out that so many of his policies actually are Trump's policies. on, in many ways, on immigration, on foreign relations. He is more aggressive on warfare. So I don't see how any of this is actually solving problems. All right, you can think otherwise, but try and convince me. Try with facts. With facts. Don't try and convince me with your belief. Try and convince me with facts that something is actually improving by his actions. Okay? So let me get back to this. Okay, I just passed a portion of the video where he's talking about immigration, and what he's had just said is they should all be going back. Okay? So if you're in favor of immigrant rights, if you're in favor of human rights, what kind of a statement is that? Remember what is on the base of the Statue of Liberty, and tell me that they should all be going back. Tell me that they should all be going back is standing with American values. Tell me you're an American if you think they should all be going back. Yes, Biden actually said that we should return to the filibuster that was in place when he joined the Senate 120 years ago. Yes, he said that. Okay, so I just watched a portion where he has previously said that, the majority of people at the border are not being allowed to enter. And then he starts referring to, different things like, the thing we're not going to do is allow, children to be kept outside of the border and allowed to starve to death. And he implies that this was something that the Trump administration did. There were many valid, very valid criticisms of the Trump administration handling of the immigration situation, but it was never an allegation that the Trump administration allowed children to starve to death. Being kept in cages, yes, but allowing children to starve to death was never an allegation. So this is completely disingenuous. Absolutely wrong. Okay, so something else that he starts talking about, which is completely disingenuous. He refers to people in other countries coming here because of not enough street lighting. And, how about U.S. Government, U.S. government-backed coups, overthrows of democratically elected governments, the war on drugs that turn, and all these things that turn these people's countries into death traps. Yeah, that's what they're trying to escape. They're not trying to escape not having a street light. Yeah, so he addresses this question, and I know damn well the reporter, the journalist, is so-called journalist, posing the questions to him, talking about this 9-year-old and 10-year-old coming from Honduras. There was more that came out of the conversation with the mother than, well, I sent him this 9-year-old on a 1,000-mile journey to get to the United States, and he says, oh, the conditions must be horrible. And then he says, let's send him back. Yeah, the thing is, he never addresses how, in what way the conditions are horrible or how they got to be that way. Keep in mind that under Obama, Biden, and Hillary Clinton, there was an overthrow, a coup of the democratically elected president of Honduras, which turned Honduras into a shooting gallery. Yes, those are the horrible conditions that he wants to send this child back to. All right, so we come up to the portion where he is talking about North Korea testing 2 short-range missiles. These were short-range missiles. And then he talks about, having peace talks with North Korea contingent upon denuclearization. The thing to notice about this is that when the United States talks about denuclearization with North Korea, with Iran, with any country that may possess nuclear weapons that is not a U.S. puppet state, it is always unilateral denuclearization. There is never any discussion of even reducing nuclear weapons by the United States. Now, the reason I mention that these were short-range missiles is that nuclear weapons are not short-range. You don't use nuclear technology with short-range weapons and with short-range missiles. Nuclear weapons are only intermediate or long-range or ICBM missiles. They are not short-range. So denuclearization has nothing to do with stating that, they violated something by testing short-range missiles. We test our own weapons all the freaking time. And, look at the wastelands that have been, created. The Marshall Islands, White Sands, New Mexico, sites in the Nevada desert that are still glowing with radioactivity from our actual nuclear tests. And yeah, we test weapons all the time. Yeah, and you'll see it on the news where the United States fires test weapons. Are we violating international treaties by doing so? Why is it okay for us to test them, but not for them? These were test weapons. There was nothing aggressive about them. So, and if you talk to the leaders of these countries about why they want nuclear weapons, their response is pretty consistent as a deterrent against U.S. and or Israeli aggression. Always. That is always their answer. Always. So, the only exception to that being India and Pakistan, who are just always at each other's throats. But every other country, you talk about denuclearization, and we're not telling Pakistan or India to denuclearize, but we want everyone else, that any country that doesn't agree with us, we want them to give up nuclear weapons while we keep our own. Okay, so I just watched the part about voting rights, and while I agree with the fact that the Republican moves toward restricting voting rights are horrendous, as he said, despicable. I think that it is sick, just as he stated. However, using such language is highly inflammatory and in many ways divisive. He does make the distinction that many Republican voters also think that these steps are inappropriate and uncalled for, unfair, undemocratic. Okay, I agree with all of that. But I'm not so fond of his language, which is meant to be emotionally inflammatory, and it is his language. If you're talking about Republicans, stop using these labels, and talk about what positive steps you want to take to actually fix it, because he doesn't actually lay out any positive steps forward. Instead, he defers away from that. I don't want to lay out a strategy. Well, if you're not laying out a strategy, how is anybody supposed to be behind whatever you're doing? This is just asking people to be against Republicans. And how do you think Republicans are going to react? You can talk about Republican voters, but if you're attacking Republicans, you're not going to get Republican voters behind you. So this is a false argument. This isn't doing anything positive. This is just passive aggressive attack. It's more division. Just a short little quote here. He says, I've never been able to plan 3.5 years ahead. Don't you think a president should be able to plan 3.5 years ahead? I mean, he was talking about election, but it sounded more like a general statement and seems pretty accurate. He's only focused on the here and now and everything that he's doing. So, but that's normal for American politics. They focus on the right here, right now. Popularity in the polls and getting elected to this cycle. Okay, so he starts talking about China and says, that, he does not want a confrontation with China. He just wants competition with China. And then he launches into, the Quad, and that he's going to meet with a number of European countries and hold China accountable. He talks about research into science, quantum computing, and healthcare in medicine. Well, here's an idea. Yeah, he talks about alliances. Okay, well, how about this for an idea? How about forming alliances with China, with the Quad, with Russia, with the 20-some European countries, so that all this scientific research into science and quantum computing and medicine is all shared equally and freely without the profit motive involved, just for the betterment of mankind. But holding China accountable, that is confrontational. When you're trying to form alliances against one country or two countries or anyone that you don't agree with, when you're trying to form alliances against these countries, that is confrontational. Okay, this is the ultimate in hypocrisy. He starts talking about human rights and China, and let me make this clear. There is no allegation of genocide of the Uyghurs in China. There is no genocide in Hong Kong. There is no genocide in Taiwan. And meanwhile, the United States completely turns a blind eye to the human rights of the people in the 7 countries that we are bombing, that under Obama caused the greatest refugee crisis in the history of mankind. Turns a blind eye to the Palestinian, the Israeli genocide of the Palestinians, the Saudi genocide of the Yemeni people. The United States, under Obama and Biden, turned a blind eye, and he continues to turn a blind eye to what happened in Libya, which resulted in current slave markets in the streets in that country. You want to talk about human rights? Okay, let's talk about human rights. Let's have that conversation. So his statement was, China has the potential to become extremely powerful and wealthy and all this stuff, and through competition, but they are not going to become China is not going to become the most powerful and wealthy country in the world under his watch, because America is going to continue to grow and expand. Tell me this is not empire. Just try. He is blatant about it. He is right out there saying it. And let's go back to the human rights thing. How about medical care? How about people not being evicted from their homes? How about, food insecurity because of money, because of income, because of poverty? Yeah, you want to talk about human rights? Let's have this discussion. It is all about profit for him, and that profit really doesn't reach to you. The safety does not matter to you. If you die from not being able, if you're diabetic and you die from not being able to afford your insulin, if you wind up with kidney failure, going blind, losing limbs, if you suffer a heart attack because you cannot afford your heart medication, none of this matters unless Some corporations are getting your money. Okay? How is that compatible with human rights? Okay, so he talks about autocracy versus democracy, and then he uses Russia as an example. All right, I'm going to refer back to the last Russian election. Do you know how many presidential candidates were on the debate stage for the Russian debates? How many parties were represented? It was something like 18. Compare that to our two, both of which are on the same side, and both of which take donations from the same corporations, both of which are aggressive against other countries, and so and then autocracy. Over 70% of Americans support Medicare for all, universal health care. A huge, more than half of Americans support a UBI. Are any of them being listened to? No, he actually said that if Medicare for all passed his desk, that he would veto it. So that is autocracy. His own behavior is autocracy. Most Americans want out of our forever wars in the Middle East, and yet he increases the aggressions and the troop levels in the very countries in which we want our forces pulled out of. We want most Americans, the vast majority, 90% of Americans think we should reduce military spending. Is he in favor of that? No. All right, so this is autocracy. Stop thinking that because he's throwing words around that they mean anything. Okay, so in the last portion here, I think that in the end he makes some fairly good points, although that too many of them are way too vague. They're talking points. He does talk about infrastructure, which we absolutely need to improve our infrastructure. I'm not so much on board with his major focus on infrastructure. His focus on infrastructure right out the bat talks about industry and business profitability, all this kind of stuff. He talks about creating good paying jobs over and over and over and over, but the definition of good paying jobs by this definition, depends on just basically sheer numbers, which belies what I've gone into before about the purchasing power of the dollar. Even if you increase the minimum wage or you create jobs that pay $25 an hour, if the value of the dollar continues to decline, which with this infrastructure, you have to print more and more money, which dilutes the value of the dollar and makes it decline even further. But that's another discussion. In the end, my impression comes out as it began. The so-called journalists that were there were handpicked with pre-agreed questions, which you could see him flipping through a book and reading stuff while he was talking, So these were notes to himself on talking points on all of this. This is not a question. None of the discussion varied from very specific, narrow range of topics. There was no discussion. There were no hard questions that focused on universal health care. There were no discussions about raising the wage. There were no discussions about the impending, end of the rent and mortgage moratorium and the mass evictions which will follow. There was no discussion about holding peace talks with other countries. There was no challenge regarding Saudi Arabia or Israel. There was no discussion on any hard topic at all. Everyone that was there was handpicked, and they agreed to keep the topic of discussion friendly, and even where it may have seemed to have just barely gone into being a difficult question, in the end it really was not. And you cannot deny this. There was nothing that was confrontational. There was nothing there that a real journalist would have asked. So it all comes down to the same thing. I watched this online on the Hill, and there were quite a few more thumbs downs than thumbs up for this so-called press conference. This was not an open press conference where he was going to take any questions that were presented to him. This was a theater. This was a scripted play, and nothing but. So, that's pretty much what I had said was going to happen. Now, no, there wasn't a teleprompter, but there may as well have been. So, anyway, that is my impression of his press conference. I know I've made this video quite long, but I think it warranted it. Anyway, please share this video. Talk about these subjects. Be sure and leave your comments below, and I will catch you in the next one. If you can, please donate $1 a month to help expand the channel.